So Paul, let me ask you about the current deal flow and what is the dynamic you see now, and if we compare it to how it was 12 months ago, how does it look like?
I think there's certainly been an upturn in the market over the last sort of 12 months or so, but there is still a lot of liquidity which is chasing an increasingly a small number of deals. So there is an issue there in terms of the number of transactions actually happening, not in terms of the availability of finance right now, I think, which is certainly there, which is having an impact on terms and many other things. But the one sort of thing I've noticed in particular over the last 12 months on transactions is that most deals are taking a lot longer to close because there's a lot more sensitivity, I think, around specific issues in different jurisdictions, which means that the process is very extended and the number of transactions that can be completed in any period of time is actually much smaller than it used to be, simply in terms of the number of people that need to be involved to do deals.
Is it because lenders are getting more and more cautious about whom they lend to?
Yeah, I think lenders are more cautious, I think, and sponsors are more cautious as well. And so they are tending to look at transactions in a great deal more detail than perhaps they used to 5 or 6 years ago. But also, I think that the processes themselves are just tending to take longer internally within banks and right across the board.
If you look at the instruments which are being used, we see perhaps a pickup in the use of in the volumes of high-yield bonds. Do you think this is the trend which will be going forward, or it's a one-off thing?
I don't think it's a one-off thing. There certainly is a trend towards increasing use of high-yield bonds, but I think it's very geographic specific. So there's a major need for it in Poland and some of the stronger markets. In some of the more esoteric markets, I think it's still very difficult to do high-yield bonds, not least because of the sort of local issues that can create problems in what I referred to earlier on about the time in which deals take to complete. There's a structural issue there in terms of being able to get a bond in place for the window when you need to issue the bond. And that can be a process which can be much more difficult in some more challenging jurisdictions in Central and Eastern Europe. There's also some issues around the size of transactions. Obviously, high-yield bonds are really only available for the larger deals, and there are a fairly limited number of larger deals in Central and Eastern Europe at the moment. And I think one has to ask a question around the spreads as well, because an investor looking to buy bonds in Central and Eastern Europe will expect, probably still, some kind of premium over bonds they're looking at buying in Western Europe. And then there's a question mark over whether they remain a viable product at the pricing that they may end up reaching.
Well, there is a lot of uncertainty now with central banks in different countries in the Central and Eastern Europe trying to manage the monetary policies. And of course, CEE is being highly influenced by what's going on with the monetary policy in the United States. So do you remain optimistic about the things for the future? What's your sentiment?
Yeah, I think the sentiment is reasonably good at the moment, but it does vary very much from country to country. And I think what has changed over the last few years is that both investors and banks and financial institutions generally don't view Central and Eastern Europe quite as one homogeneous area as they used to. CEE used to be an area that people would come and invest in and took more or less a similar view on most countries. I think people are realising that there are significant differences between the different countries in Central and Eastern Europe. So it's not just a question of making a play for a deal in Central and Eastern Europe. You have to look much more carefully at precisely where it is. And I think going forward, that will change as well. That split and that lack of homogeneity will increase as time goes on.
Well, and to be careful, I think that's why people use your service. Thank you very much for agreeing.